At issue tonight, 4 days to the New Hampshire primary. A former GOP candidate with ties to both Donald Trump and Nikki Haley makes his endorsement. And our exclusive tracking poll shows a possible shift in momentum.
President Biden is not campaigning in the Granite State, and his name isn't even on the ballot. We'll look at this complicated situation and the write-in ballot effort being led on his behalf.
And we're going to talk to the Democratic congressman whose name is on the ballot. Dean Phillips is going to join us to discuss why he's challenging an incumbent president in just a few minutes. At Issue starts right now. Hello and happy Friday to you. Welcome to another live edition of At Issue. It is the Friday before Tuesday's New Hampshire primary. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. We've got a packed show for you tonight. In a few minutes, former Mass GOP Chair Jennifer Nassour and Samuel Galbu, because I was practicing and almost had. He's going to join us to break down everything that's happened in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, but before we do that, we want to give you a look at the ballots for Tuesday's primary. With all of the focus on a half dozen candidates, it's easy to forget there are a lot of people running for president in the Granite State. Check it out. The Democratic ballot is there on the left, 21 candidates on it. The Republican ballot on the right with 24 candidates. Now, as you look at both, you will eventually see some familiar names. Many you've likely never heard about, though. We're going to circle back to that in just a minute.
Here's our new exclusive Suffolk University NBC 10 Boston Globe, New Hampshire primary daily tracking poll. There's more good news for former President Trump. His already comfortable lead grew by 2 points from yesterday to 52%. Nikki Haley lost a percentage point. She's at 35%. Ron DeSantis remains at 6%. 1% say they'll support someone else. 4% remain undecided. 2% refuse to answer. This is a poll of 500 likely Republican primary voters.
Let's go ahead and bring you some live images from Concord, New Hampshire, where Donald Trump will soon be speaking to supporters. He's expected to be joined by South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who is expected to give his endorsement to Donald Trump at this event. He joins Vivek Ramaswamy and Doug Burgum as former candidates who are backing Trump. But this endorsement could be significant because Scott represents South Carolina, which, as we know, is Nikki Haley's home state, and it's home to the next Republican primary in late February. And the endorsement suit really kind of adds insult to injury. Haley actually appointed Scott to the Senate seat he now holds when she was governor.
That's an ouchie, I think. All right, we want to go back to that Democratic ballot now because something that's not on the ballot sticks out to us. Take a look. These are the sample ballots from Dixville, New Hampshire.
You're going to see Democrats on the left. They start with the president, but not President Biden. It's actually President R. Bodie. Dixville's ballot goes by alphabetical order, so you got to go pretty far down before you start seeing some names you might recognize. There's Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson. And no, you don't see Joe Biden's name on it, but at the very, very bottom, you're going to see a little thing that says write-in. And that is where Joe Biden hopes to really make some headway. There is a big write-in campaign going on. And so they're hoping folks will write in Joebiden. Don't have to spell Robinette. And then just fill in that circle to the right.
Very hard to do, but some people will. NBC 10 political reporter Matt Pritchard is live in Manchester. Matt, you spoke to a bunch of Democrats about this unusual situation. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Corey, Sue, this really is a unique situation. An incumbent president choosing not to be on a primary ballot as he seeks his second term in office. Of course, we know where this all stemmed from. President Biden wanting to move South Carolina up in the process over Iowa and New Hampshire. But New Hampshire basically said no, they weren't going to do that. Democrats, Republicans alike, making sure that they were still going to be the first in the nation's state. And of course, many of the Democrats on this ballot, including Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, they say he should be out here. He should be debating and he should be taking part in the process here in the Granite State. Now, earlier today, we were hearing about how many Democrats may be coming out. Secretary of State David Scanlon saying around 88,000 Democrats he's expecting to come out to the primaries. Got a chance to speak with the New Hampshire Democrats today to find out if they think that those numbers will actually come to fruition.
I think that for Democrats, the fear of Donald Trump returning to the White House is enough to motivate them to do just about anything. So they certainly will turn out to vote to express their opinion of that. But I don't know if it's going to be 88,000 of them.
We will just have to wait and see. Of course, Democrats are going to have some choices on that ballot, Dean Phillips being one, who you'll hear from in just one moment. Marianne Williamson is another. We spoke with her earlier this morning. Of course, she was in 2020 in that election cycle. We talked with her about the differences between that time around and in 2024. Take a listen.
The horse race, and that's debilitating, brutal even, particularly this year, more so than last year. But the people of the United States are not the problem. And participating in this experiment of self-governance, as wounded as it is, as assaulted as it is, from the inside as well as the outside, that's what you're really seeing now, is very disturbing. But I think any of us I think Americans care.
So interesting perspective there from someone who has been here before. We will just have to wait and see what voters think come Tuesday at his primary day here in New Hampshire for both Republicans and Democrats alike. Corey, Sue?
Matt, Boston member Cheryl Wu is going to be up in New Hampshire. She's encouraging Democrats to write in Joe Biden's name. What about members of New Hampshire's all-Democratic congressional delegation? What are they going to do, and are they worried it may upset their constituents?
Yeah, it's interesting because we hadn't heard much from them over the course of the last few weeks and months leading up to primary week. But today we heard from a whole bunch of them. They were actually holding a press conference today talking about the anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned by the Supreme Court. But of course, this is first in the nation primary week here in New Hampshire. So they were going to take some questions on the politics of it all. Here's what they had to say.
I've already written in Joe Biden's name on the ballot. When you think about the bipartisan progress we've made, we have a lot more work to do.
I think he's been a very successful president, and I personally, given my experience, want to do anything to stop Donald Trump.
Will it be enough, though, for President Biden? Again, voters have to take that extra step of actually writing in his name and then coloring in a little circle there on their ballot instead of just checking off a candidate name that's sitting right in front of them. A lot to watch for as we get into this weekend. Guys?
All right, Matt Pritchard live for us in New Hampshire. We appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much. Safe travels to you and Sean. All right, so before we get to our first guest, let's talk about that. If you're the Biden campaign, I guess, how do you even begin to gauge success of the New Hampshire primary? And if you're one of those lawmakers in New Hampshire, do you risk upsetting the locals by writing in Joe Biden?
I think all of that, I hate to sound like the DNC, but it's totally unimportant this year. I mean, it really is a 2028 problem, and the next years that come and how the DNC is going to deal with the state lawmakers in New Hampshire and with the people. Joe Biden lost the primary last, when he ran the first time. And I remember the hostage video of he and Jill getting the heck out of Dodge and getting to South Carolina as quickly as possible. So this is sort of a non-issue this year that we're talking a lot about because it's complicated, but it's a 2028 problem.
And I expect to hear in the South Carolina primary, the build up there, a lot of folks down there saying, thank you, Joe Biden. So you're going to get a juxtaposition of those two feelings. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our first guest, presidential candidate and Congressman Dean Phillips. He's been representing Minnesota's 3rd district since 2019. Congressman, we certainly appreciate you taking the time. You entered the race back on October 27th after months of advocating for someone to challenge Joe Biden in the primary. In a recent interview you did with Reuters, you said the president, quote, should have passed the torch. And you called on others to join the stage, and when they wouldn't, you decided to do it yourself. Reading that, sounds to me like you didn't want to do this in the first place. And if that's the case, why would someone vote for a candidate who wanted another person to run and get in the race?
Well, first of all, that's how we practice democracy. I happen to be a Gold Star son. I lost my father in the Vietnam War. He gave his life to this country. And I'm someone who doesn't sit down and shush up and do what my party says. I do what our country needs, and that is participate. Now, we have two men who this country does not want, either Biden or Trump. We all know that. We have a Joe Biden who's a good man. He is going to lose to Donald Trump. He's losing in all the battleground states, losing in the national polls, and has the worst historically low approval numbers in presidential history. Then you have Donald Trump, a man who inspired an insurrection, who's under federal indictment, and our country wants to move on. So I'm doing this for reasons I think are pretty obvious. Not to mention, I'm not in my 80s. I'm a competent businessman. I've been in Congress for 3 terms. I've been the chair of a health system and also a regent at a university, a lot of experience. And I'm finding extraordinary love and interest and energy and inspiration here in New Hampshire, where we got to practice democracy.
I hear what you're saying, Congressman, but if that's the case, why did you wait so long to get into the race? If you felt like Joe Biden wasn't the guy, why didn't you say, I'm going to be the person to do it? Instead, you called on other people to do it first, and then you said, well, nobody else is going to do it, so I guess I'll do it.
Well, I'll tell you, because when you don't have a lot of name recognition, it's hard to start a campaign from scratch. That's why I called on the president to pass the torch. He inferred he would. He should have, and he still should. Then I called on others who are more proximate, prepared for the race. They have national organization, national name recognition, but they're cowards. They wouldn't jump into the race, meet the moment, and do what our country needs. So if not now, when? And if not me, who? It came to that point 2 weeks before the October 27 filing deadline here in Concord, New Hampshire. I decided someone had to do it, and it's the best decision I've ever made. This has been an extraordinary journey. Our country needs change. We want to move from the past, go to the future, and we're ill-prepared. Our country is suffering from high costs, chaos in our southern border, our cities, and around the world, the Middle East and Eastern Europe. It's time for change. Anybody who wants a new generation of competency, decency, and bipartisanship, legitimately, I'm their guy, and I'm so glad I'm doing this. Someone had to, and it's been a thrill.
All right, let's talk about some of the policy issues. On paper, you and the president agree on the vast majority of issues. He's a staunch advocate of abortion rights, so are you. He wants to tackle climate change, so do you. In fact, the Biden administration has thanked you for your, quote, almost 100% support, end quote. So where do you and Joe Biden differ?
Well, first of all, I did vote for those programs because they were investments in America. I'm here to invest in Americans. Costs are too high. I think everybody watching this right now knows that. We have to do something to address the high cost of housing, if you can even find it. We need to have health care for everybody. 66% of bankruptcies right now in the United States are from health care debt. We need to have an education system that does not burden young people with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Fuel is too high, food is too expensive, and we've got chaos all over the place. And I'm going to do this differently. Joe Biden's a good man, but he has not addressed the needs of this country right now, and Washington is simply not listening. So focused on litigating ridiculous cultural wars, there's no common sense. So those who are looking for competent, common sense leadership, I think it's time for change, and that's exactly what I intend to bring.
Congressman, you've talked about polling when justifying your place in the race. We just heard you mention it there. But now that we actually have people voting, what is going to determine how far you take your campaign? What does success in New Hampshire and other states look like to you?
Well, this is the first in the nation primary. One reason I felt this was terribly important was to honor that extraordinary 103-year tradition of democracy. The Democratic National Committee, I hope most people know, tried to literally disenfranchise every voter in this state. I think practicing here is important. In 1968, of course, another Minnesota Congress member, Eugene McCarthy, the senator, challenged the incumbent president, unpopular for similar reasons, and he came close to beating him. It changed the entire race. President Johnson dropped out, and that is what I believe President Biden should do. Unless he does, there will be no competition. We will not defeat Donald Trump, and I'm doing what you do in America, which is practice democracy. I'm actually quite astounded that so many other Democrats are afraid of that, and that's indeed what I'm intending to do. I'm going to go all the way until we get to a point where there are head-to-head polls between me and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Donald Trump. If Joe Biden is ahead from some miracle, you know what? I will wrap it up and get behind him. I think that's really unlikely. Conversely, when I'm ahead of Donald Trump, I do believe it's a responsibility of someone who's saying he wishes to protect democracy to do the same for me. Bow out of the race, do not accept the nomination, and put the country over your party and your personal interests.
I want to ask you about the recent Twitter space that you did on X with Elon Musk. You're Jewish, and we're just wondering, why would you associate with Elon, someone who has, peddled anti-Semitism? He's amplified conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement theory. What was your thinking on that?
Well, my thinking is this, and I understand the question, but when the Democratic National Committee and Democratic Party try to deplatform anybody who would have the audacity to practice democracy and take on the sitting incumbent who is going to lose to Donald Trump, it is challenging to find platform to introduce myself to a country that doesn't yet know me. Elon Musk has 170 million followers on X. I did that with Jason Calacanis from the All In podcast, and of course Bill Ackman, and generated millions and millions of viewers. It wasn't about them. him, it was about all the millions of people to introduce myself to. And we live in an era where there's a lot of new media in which people are paying a lot more attention to than some of the traditional outlets. So that's indeed why I introduced myself. I do not know Elon Musk, and frankly, I don't make judgments on people until I sit with them, I ask them questions, challenge them. I've not had that chance, and until I do, I won't call him an anti-Semite or anything else.
Were you aware of some of the things that he's posted on X as it relates to anti-Semitism, some of the memes that he's posted, and some of the retweets of folks spouting the great replacement theory? Did you feel like it was a calculated risk that you took to be associated with somebody who does that?
Well, first, let me make it very clear. I am someone who believes deeply in including people. I do not associate with anybody who ultimately is anti-Semitic, is racist, is a misogynist. But the fact of the matter is that we got a lot of posters on social media that do some stupid things, including Donald Trump, by the way. If you want to talk about someone who's repulsive, who uses social media to demean and diminish other human beings, this is a man running for president of the United States of America. I'm running to defeat him. This is not about Elon Musk. It is about a repulsive, dangerous, potential future president of America, and the only one enabling that right now is Joe Biden. I'm trying to wake up Democrats from this delusion that somehow he can win. He cannot. And at the end of the day, like I said, I will sit with people, I will challenge them, I'll listen to them, and I will make my conclusions once I have that chance. That was the first time I had with Elon Musk, and I wish everybody would be a little bit more reasonable and decent to our fellow Americans and human beings on social media and stop this nonsense. That's why I'm running for president. It's common sense.
All right, Congressman Dean Phillips, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and thank you for being on At Issue. We'll see you in New Hampshire.
Thank you so much.
All right, when we come back, we're going to bring in our panel. Sam Gebru, professor at Tufts, is here, and he's joined by Jennifer Nassour, former chairperson for the Massachusetts Republican Party. At Issue returns after this. Welcome back to At Issue. We've still got 4 days before the primary, so if you want one more chance to go see a candidate in person, you can scan the QR code right there on your screen. It'll take you to our candidate tracker. That shows all the events that are coming up in New Hampshire. Tomorrow, Donald Trump, Nikki Haley both have stops. So does Dean Phillips, who we just heard from. Even Ryan Binkley, who has a stop in Manchester.
That's your favorite candidate, I think.
My favorite guy. He's got gumption. All right, we've covered a lot since the top of the show. Our exclusive New Hampshire poll, President Biden not appearing on the New Hampshire primary ballot. We talked to Dean Phillips. Well, let's go ahead and bring in a few more people to talk. Our guest tonight, Samuel Gebru, professor of the practice of political science at Tufts University, and Jennifer Nassour, former chairperson for the Massachusetts Republican Party and president and founder of the Pocketbook Project.
Welcome to both of you. All right, Jennifer, let's start with you. What's your take on what's happening with this write-in campaign for the Democrats in New Hampshire?
I mean, it's so silly. Unfortunately, one, I think it's a failure of the Biden campaign to just not say what you said. This is a 2028 issue. This isn't a 2024 issue. This is important to us. We want to fix this. We want it to be South Carolina first. Okay, New Hampshire, we're giving you what you want now, but we now then have 4 years to negotiate.
But isn't he kind of splitting the baby here? Because now Biden gets to say to South Carolina, look, I'm giving you what you want. And New Hampshire, you haven't been that great to me anyway, and it doesn't really matter if I win or lose in New Hampshire. So he kind of gets it both ways, no?
He does, but you're dissing a whole bunch of voters, right? And I mean, we're an entire United States of America. It's not the United States of South Carolina, the United States of New Hampshire, the United States of Iowa. I mean, so I think you have to look at it on a holistic basis. If he is running for president of the United States, it is the entire United States. So fix the issue and use your bully pulpit to fix it going forward, and don't be a child about it right now.
Sam, is this just sort of the price that you pay for an endorsement, I guess, because President Biden, DNC, doing this because South Carolina was the saving grace for him? Is this just kind of, now his time to pay the piper?
I mean, South Carolina definitely was the saving grace last time around. Congressman Jim Clyburn, literally the kingmaker. So for sure, President Biden owes that state a lot. I do agree with you, Jennifer, that, he should not have snubbed New Hampshire in that way. But, this is Biden and the DNC ripping the Band-Aid off, I think. And in the grand scheme of things, I think that what's going to matter the most is a challenge to Donald Trump. And so while New Hampshire voters may be upset with President Biden or the DNC, I think they're really laser focused on challenging Trump.
Do you think the Republicans will follow suit at some point and also go to South Carolina first at some point?
Maybe. I don't know.
Thanks for the segue.
They seem really steadfast with their process right now.
Let's talk about South Carolina. Your initial thoughts to seeing Tim Scott endorse Donald Trump over the woman, former governor, who one might say is the only reason why Tim Scott is in the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, I would like not to say that it's sexism, but it feels a little bit like sexism, number one. It also, makes me wonder. Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, but suddenly it's super important to go and grab people who are in the swamp to endorse him. So what swamp did he actually drain? He didn't drain it while he was there from 2017 to 2020. So, and he sure as heck doesn't look like he's doing it now.
I was just going to ask, all these candidates who were against Trump are now endorsing him. What's your take on that?
I think they're realizing that they have to fall in line. I think a lot of them are running scared. Maybe Tim Scott is vying for a cabinet appointment or something. I do agree. Trump promised to drain the swamp. If anything, he contributed to the swamp in many ways. These court cases being one example of that. But we've seen people like Liz Cheney that have stood up and challenged Donald Trump, and even her last name could not protect her. So I think a lot of people are scared, and with definite reason to be so.
We've seen the Republican Party over the last few elections make inroads into communities of color. Despite her, what you might consider gaffes on race recently, do you think that Tim Scott aligning himself with Donald Trump, who has made many more significant gaffes on the issue of race as compared to Nikki Haley, is going to do damage to the widening of the GOP tent?
No. So I think that there are numerous problems that the Republican Party has had. Number one, continuously running old white guys for higher office. Nikki Haley is a woman of color, and I think that contributes to the racism aspect, right? And so I think that there's a lot more that the Republican Party can do in broadening the tent, bringing more people in. I don't think that Tim Scott is someone who's out there and he's trying to bolster Black Americans in this country. And I think him joining with Donald Trump, who I think is one of the most racist people who has been in higher office, really, to me, makes me wonder where Tim Scott's priorities are. Are they for his constituency and the greater good of Americans? And so for me, it is, look, leadership is leadership. Leadership is talking to everyone. Leadership is everyone having a seat at the table, finding a conciliatory tone, finding unity. And that's what Nikki Haley will bring, because she is an actual leader who will listen to people. I watch her out there on the campaign trail. She is listening to every question. She is answering every question. And that is what the country needs to heal, because right now we are in a very bad place. And I blame Donald Trump for us being a very disrespectful, nasty country.
If I can just build on that, Tim Scott has no daylight with Donald Trump. I mean, their policy is lockstep. When you look at Tim Scott's voting record in the Senate, he voted in support of Donald Trump's policies the entire time. So there isn't much difference in terms of substance or really cosmetic.
Jennifer, we've been hearing New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's name. She's going to be in New Hampshire tomorrow campaigning for Trump. Is it too early to be talking about who his vice presidential pick might be? And will she help him in the age world? Like, she's obviously young, obviously competent, whether you agree with her or not. Will that help him?
Well, talk about someone who sold her soul to the devil. Elise Stefanik was no fan of Donald Trump when Donald Trump was first running for office, and was very open and candid about that. Yet now, when she found it to be politically convenient for her, she suddenly got in line, exactly, not wanting to take the Liz Cheney hatchet. And so I think it is, listen, we have only had one state which has voted so far. New Hampshire would be state number 2. We have a whole country out there. And so I think to pull out a crystal ball and say whatever candidate it's going to be is picking a vice president is a mistake, and actually is unfair to democracy and to all those good people out there who should be getting out to vote.
In terms of that VP pick, I know we still got a lot of voting to do, but do you think the campaign is going to struggle with making a choice of picking somebody in the Mike Pence mode, establishment, well-respected, conservative, or are they going to go, I want somebody very far on the right to even Donald Trump, like a Stefanik, like maybe a Marjorie Taylor Greene?
You know, when it comes to policy issues, Mike Pence was indeed far on the right, in my opinion, although he did not throw rocks in the same way that Donald Trump did. He was a very far-right vice president, and before that, in his previous roles. I think Elise Stefanik presents, for Donald Trump, a pretty good candidate. Look, I'm not sexist. I have, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. She also just took down the big bad Harvard, and I think that plays really well in her favor.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you guys for being here with us again, and thank you for joining us all week for these live editions of At Issue. We really do appreciate it.
Remember, we're going to be back here Sunday morning, extended coverage of the New Hampshire primary starting at 9:30, a live edition of At Issue for Manchester. And